everyone. This is Jane Winsett, Joanne McQueen, and Kathy McMahon Klosterman in Miami University's first WGS interview series. Okay, the first question for our interview is, what was it like starting the first Butler County chapter of the National Organization for Women?
Well, it was very exciting. We actually came from a consciousness raising group that we had been meeting for maybe a year before we actually started the chapter. So we were learning so much, and we were so excited, and then we had to decide what exactly we wanted to work on too. And one of the very first things was violence against women. So we formed a task force. Task forces were very popular back then. So we had a rape task force, battered women's task force, and a masculine mystique task force. But very important things came out of these task forces locally. I mean, we started a battered women's shelter out of that. We started rape training for the county
Rape
out
crisis
of that.
counseling.
So, but okay, you want to add anything to that?
Well, so we were certainly aware of a national movement and the National Organization for Women, and I think we took to heart think globally and act locally. So one of the ways that we could put into action what we were learning and reading about and becoming awake to, if you will, is how to act locally to affect change. And I think that we saw the a now chapter as being a vehicle to be able to do that.
That's perfect.
Now it's very powerful. I could call radio stations up or offices and say, my name is Joanne McQueen from the Butler County chapter of the National Organization for Women, and they would listen.
I will say one of the things that one of our strategies back in the day, both with the Butler County chapter and the Miami-Oxford chapter now, is that there were often times when it was a small group, but we acted like we were a big group. So we would write letters to the editor, we would call news stations and so on, and we would act like there were probably hundreds and hundreds of us, when there might have been 12 of us. But they didn't know that.
Right.
That was especially true for the Miami-Oxford chapter, especially for that. But we just thought that we could do anything. Seriously. We were reading about other chapters across the country. We had Ms. Magazine had come out, and there was never any doubt that we wanted to share our knowledge. We thought people don't know this, so all we have to do is we have to tell them what the situation is and how they could correct it. Very naive, because we're still dealing with all of those issues now, all these years later.
Yeah, we really thought if people understood the issues and the underlying consequences of some of the things that were going on, once they understood that, they would want to change. Well, not so much.
It'd be nice if that were the case.
Yeah, it would be wonderful if that were the case.
We were so fortunate also that we had women in the group, Butler County Now. One woman was a battered woman, and she did open up her home originally to use it as a shelter for battered women. And then we had a woman, Mary Beasley, who just died recently, worked for Family Service. I believe she was the director of Family Service.
For Butler County.
Who gave of her time. And those of us who wanted to be trained as rape counselors, once a week, was it in the evening, she'd give up her time, and she taught us, the skills to deal with the rape victim. She taught us how to role play. I had never role played in my life before. And she was saying, well, that suggestion is good, or yes, you might offer her a Coke, or and then that became part of the system, and they eventually hired people and paid them for what we were doing as volunteers.
And with that, with Mary Beasley, who, as Joanne said, she died this month, April. She also brought in survivors of rape to speak with us and tell their story, which was really difficult to hear. She also brought in judges. She brought in police officers to talk to us about how police responded to rape victims. And we were trained to meet a victim wherever she was. It could be at the police station, which it sometimes was. It could be at the hospital, which it also sometimes was in the emergency room. And that we would follow them through whatever they wanted to do, but it was their choice. Whether they wanted to prosecute or not, we would tell them their options, and that we would be present with them through the whole process, whatever they chose to do.
If they didn't want to report it, we didn't push that.
So related to being rape crisis counselors, there were a lot of things that I certainly learned as a young professional, and as a faculty member at Miami, and there weren't not many women at the time. It was not uncommon for students who had been sexually assaulted in some way to seek out women faculty to share their story, and I was one of those. But one of the things that really I didn't understand for a long time is that my experience with victims of rape were that they wanted to blame themselves. Now, the media certainly encouraged them to do that. You know, you wore a short skirt, you shouldn't have been out at 2 o'clock in the morning, why were you where you, in the place that you were? So there was a lot of cultural, social movement toward blaming the victim. It's somehow your fault. But what used to perplex me, and I taught women's studies, is why victims agreed with that and felt somehow it was their fault, and yes, they shouldn't have been such and such a place or whatever. Till I finally, perhaps reading enough feminist literature, realized that what that did was give them a sense of control. That if it was not anything they did or failed to do, then this could happen to them again. And that was too much to bear. But if they could say, yes, my skirt was too short, I can control that. I can never wear a skirt that short again, and this will never happen to me again. I'll never be raped again. If it's because I was walking alone at night, I can change that. But, so there was a real need, I think, to feel that, yes, it was something I did, and consequently, I can change that, and it will never happen to me again. Because it's just too much to bear to think, I can't control that, and it could happen again. But it took me a while to understand that that piece was an empowering piece, in some respects, for victim. That they felt then they had some control of assuring this won't happen again. It took me a while to get that.
Thank you for sharing that. What was the student response like when the Miami-Oxford chapter of NOW was created?
It was, they didn't know anything about it at first, obviously. So the response that we had from the campus was from different groups. AWS, Association of Women Students. They had a representative come.
Yes.
And there was another person came, I can't remember.
Jean Burke and some of those students that I had who were education majors and in women's studies, I think were very happy to find a local chapter. At that time, at Miami University, students were not allowed to have cars on campus or in town. You had to live, I think, over 200 miles from campus in special permission to be able to have a car in the town or on campus. So students didn't have cars, very, very few had cars, and there was no bus system. There was no public transportation of any kind to Hamilton or Fairfield or anywhere, or even in town. There was no bus system in town even. Certainly no taxis and no Uber back in the 70s. So for students who wanted to participate and wanted to be engaged in activism related to women's issues, outside of Association for Women Students, this was their only option really, and I think that there was a very positive response to it by a small group of women. I mean, I think a lot of other women didn't really care. I mean, like many student organizations, there were students who were like, what's that about? I'm busy over here.
When we saw the real reaction is when we did the first Take Back the Night March. Big crowd, a lot of people. I think that probably, Kathy, that was really when we really made contact with the students.
Yeah,
Was with Take Back the Night March.
Would you mind sharing your experiences in planning the first Take Back the Night March for the Miami-Oxford campus?
Sure. There had been, I think, the first Take Back the Night March in the country, in California. And Joanne had read about it, and as Joanne often did, said, we could do that. We should do that. So really the two of us decided that we would do it. And we chose a date in October, and Joanne has a specific reason, thinking that's Halloween, where people get dressed up, and suddenly women can be out at night. And nobody says anything then. And so the idea was to let women know that they had a right to walk the street at night and to be out any time of day or night. We realized as rape crisis counselors that women unconsciously live on a rape schedule all the time. It's in the back of most women's head. When you're coming out of a grocery store at night toward your car, you've got it in the back of your head somewhere. If you're walking up the street and someone is close behind you and you hear footsteps, and if they cross over, it's like, okay, why did they do that? And if they hurry up to pass you, that's more frightening even, because you don't know what's going on. So realizing that women really, it's always kind of there. So to have at least one time when we, one, raise awareness about assaults, and two, say to women, you have the right to walk the streets the same way that men do, and not be blamed for something. Well, we don't say to a man who's been robbed, well, why did you have your wallet on you, for goodness sakes? Well, what were you thinking? So we decided to do it, and we just kind of mimeographed pieces, announcements. We did not that first year notify the police. We did years after and cooperated with them. But the first year, we didn't know how they would respond to that. And we didn't think they would respond well. So we did not notify them. We did contact a feminist in Cincinnati, Therese Adele, who was a headliner at the women's music festivals. And she wrote a song for that night. And she and Betsy Lippitt, who was also a feminist songwriter and singer, came up that night to kind of lead the march. And I had checked out of the audiovisual office a bullhorn. Now, you weren't allowed to take it off campus, and I knew we were going off campus. I wasn't tenured at the time. I remember saying to Joanne, I'm probably never going to get tenured now, because I've taken this, that was a big deal, that, to take their equipment off campus. And we set out a path, a route that we would walk, which we did. But what astonished us was about 200 people showed up that night, and it was a kind of drizzly night. And we had, I had handwritten sort of the order of what we would do, the welcome, the singing, where we would march, why we were doing this. And we did it. We did it.
We were marching in the streets, and people walking on the sidewalk would see what it was and would come and join us on the streets. Just strangers. That was wonderful.
In following years, we had, we identified places on Miami's campus where there had been assaults. And what we did then was we brought like day glow tape, and we went to each of those places and put an X on that spot and just said a woman was assaulted here, or an attempted assault happened over here, whatever, we would just stop, and and we had candles, and just share where those kinds of things were happening. There was not very good lighting on campus at the time. What else?
No. I do want to mention how important AWS was, which is now the F word. They were there with us, and they had to have been very helpful in getting more students to
They
come.
were.
I can't exactly remember, but Kathy didn't lose her job. After that, we talked to the police and let them know.
And I think that second year, I don't think it was the first year, President Shriver was president of Miami. And we had the path set out, but there had been an assault maybe 2 weeks or so before. And so the students decided, and this is about 10 o'clock at night now, spontaneously to go to the president's house and knock on his door and ask him to come out and speak to us. And I was sure then I was going to lose my job. Still not tenured. And you know, it's 10:30 at night, and they go up to Lewis Place and knock on the door, and President Shriver, still with his tie on, came to the door and came out and spoke to everyone and talked about things that he hoped would be changed. And
Was it about lighting? It was about lighting on
The
campus.
students were demanding better lighting in some of the dock areas for
Cookfield
protection.
especially.
Yeah, Cookfield, well, and Slant Walk. They
Yeah.
wanted some lights on Slant Walk. And he assured them that the university would look into that and attempt to make changes and make it better.
Was there any follow-through with that, with President Shriver's promises?
Yes, there was. And that, who followed through on that, really held him to that, was AWS. Now, I'm going to say, then, it's not like it is now. The follow-through on lighting was that there were a few more lights put up in various places on campus. That was about it. And that was within probably 2 or 3 years. It's not like it is now, though. Call boxes and much better lighting. But there was some positive change.
Which is nice to hear.
It was small.
Yeah.
I would say it was small.
But it's still something.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of our goals was to raise awareness for everyone, men, women, students, faculty, town people, that this happens, that it goes on, and it's not a woman's fault, to raise awareness about the issue itself. And it certainly did that. And Iris Young, who was became a very well-known feminist philosopher. One of her books is titled Throwing Like a Girl, you might know it. Iris was a faculty member in the philosophy department here at the time, and she joined us and then wrote about a 3-page critique, as only a philosopher could do, after, of things that went well, what didn't go well, what she thought we could improve on for the next year. So,
You have to remember that we had an Oxford Press once a week, and we wanted to get publicity. And the editor of the Oxford Press said, we do not use the word rape in this newspaper because it hurts Miami's reputation. They won't send their daughters there if we start publicizing about rapes.
so he wouldn't print the word.
Would print the word rape. I think later on years,
They did later.
They did.
Different, yeah.
More appealing word, maybe. Yeah, that's interesting.
Attacks, maybe. I
Right.
don't remember, but
Assaults.
yeah, I was told that by him. Okay.
Just changing topics now, though. Joanne, would you mind talking to us about your business?
Let's see. My business. Okay. It started out as I was trying to raise funds for the chapter, for the Butler County chapter, and get a percentage of it. That's how it started out. That really didn't work out very well. Uh, they weren't accustomed yet for women getting paid. We should volunteer for a good cause. But I had gotten my first job was at a place that had buttons. I can't think of the name of that kind of a business. Well, I'll say it, like novelties. So I saw that we could put, we had a rape whistle, and we had put on it rape is violence. And so we sold those, not just to the individuals, but eventually I sold those to rape crisis centers all over the country. So it just didn't work with the chapter, so I just went my own way and started Fantastic Feminist Enterprises. Because I saw the impact, the message that a whistle with a slogan on it, or a button, or a t-shirt, the impact that it had visually. Then I guess the next big thing was inventing my doll, Fantastic Feminist doll. Because Barbie was very popular, but Barbie really didn't do that much for little girls, except teach them that that's what you do as a girl, as a woman, is you're beautiful, you wear pretty clothes, you know. So, and there was Wonder Woman also, who had beautiful long wavy hair. She was tall with beautiful legs, little tiny waist. So she was a Fantastic Feminist, was in response to those two. And I wanted her to look like a normal woman. So she had short, curly hair, and normal breast size. And this is a picture of her. That's Fantastic Feminist, right there. And so she was a hit, and so then I decided to come up with a clothing line for her. So they were outfits like a race car driver, based on Janet Guthrie was the first woman to race in the Indy 500. I did contact her and ask her to send a picture. Told her what I wanted it for, and she did. So we designed that based on hers. And Sally Ride had just gone out in space, first woman in space. I wrote her also and asked for a picture of her in her space outfit. And she did write back, and she said that she doesn't have anything as exotic as a space outfit. Isn't that funny? So we came up with something for her. And a business suit, because you didn't see that many women in business.
And a judge's robe.
And the judge's robe, yes.
And a doctor's jacket.
But the little girls, and I would travel around the country to conferences, women conferences, and set up my table and sell my wares. But the little girls would think that doctor's jacket was a nurse. And it was a white jacket with a little red cross on the pocket. And but years and years later, with my great niece, I played that game with her. You know, what careers were these? And when I came to the jacket, she said a doctor, just like that. So that made me feel really good. That had an impact on her. So my latest thing is, same little niece, my niece sent me a picture of her in some mall, at some shop, where the little girls can dress up like the Disney princesses. And so I looked at that picture of her, and I thought, where's Fantastic Feminist? This is Belle and Snow White and Cinderella. So now I have decided I would like to launch costume clothing for little girls to wear to balance out the Disney characters.
So they'll have the Fantastic Feminist clothes for the girls to wear themselves,
Yes.
not just put on a doll.
That's a fun idea. When will that make its debut?
I don't know. Kathy's ordered 3.
They're not even made yet, but I know little girls I want them for.
Yes.
Why do you think these alternative images are so important for little girls and mothers and families?
It just says to the little girls that they can be anything that they want to be, that they're not limited to, to Snow White and Cinderella.
And princesses who generally in the stories are unconscious. They're in a coma, but asleep until they're kissed by a man. And then their life begins.
Or they're captured by a beast.
Yeah, right.
And, yeah.
And what's interesting is, and when we look at children's literature educationally, what we find in teachers in education, teachers largely, but also other people, often say to little girls, "You look so pretty." And they say to little boys, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Which are very different messages, which says to the girl, you are what you're going to be. You're either pretty or not. But for boys, you're going to become something. Girls don't get that same message, and I think that this can give little girls the idea that you can grow into becoming something. It isn't about how you look, it's what you do.
And you have options.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a
I needed this when I first got into the women's movement. I needed to be proud that I was a feminist. It was hard at times because the country, the world thought ill of us. We were man haters. We were baby killers. I mean, you name it. That's what we were called. So it took a little bit, some courage to stand up and say to everyone, I'm a feminist. But how she actually came about was I was at a NOW conference, my first or second national NOW conference, sitting in the stadium when this young woman in a business suit, which was a rarity, and she had a briefcase, a woman carrying a briefcase, wow, she's really a,
serious.
well, yeah, and she had put a bumper sticker on that briefcase, and it says, "I'm proud to be a feminist." And I thought, I want to be that way. I want to be proud of what I am. And that's where Fantastic Feminist came from.
And it's perfect that you're wearing that t-shirt today.
Yes, it has an impact. Sometimes I wear my feminist shirts out, and maybe I'll have another long sleeve shirt over it, and I don't think that they can see anything. Well, they do, they can see it. They'll say, "I like your shirt." And I look down there, how do they read the writing or see the symbol? But, and I think it's empowering to me and to the person that has noticed it. They're glad to see that there's someone else in the world like them.
And I think that may seem odd in 2017, that you were afraid and not proud necessarily, or striving to become proud, to say that you're a feminist. But I was just reading some of the old chapter newsletters this morning, and there was a description of some of the women going out for a drink after one of the meetings, and having men say to them, "I'm so tired of it. You must be feminists," because they were talking and not paying attention to the men apparently, and saying things like, "Well, why don't you have your boots on?" The notion was that all feminists were army boots and big coats and, of course, lesbians and man-hating. That if you said you're a feminist, that's what people thought you were. And in fact, two women who we talked with a couple of years ago, who are in their 90s, one just again passed away, were feminists, really. I mean, they engaged in that kind of work, but didn't call themselves feminists, and were never involved in the NOW chapter. And so we asked them, actually it was a class of mine, and the students said, "Well, why did you never join NOW?" And what was really, I think, telling and surprising to the students who asked the question was, and these women, again, were in their 90s, they're in their mid-90s now. One of them said, because I was afraid to. She was very honest with the students. She said, back in the 70s, she said, I was married, I had 4 children, I lived in Hamilton, Ohio, and if you said you were a feminist, people assumed you were a lesbian. And if you were a lesbian, you could have had your children taken away from you. And she said, I couldn't simply afford that professionally, and I was afraid that my children might be taken away from me. And so I couldn't join the National Organization for Women, and I couldn't say publicly that I was a feminist at the time. So it was serious then. She really was afraid her children would be taken.
And I lived in Oxford, and Oxford was a small town then. There was no interaction between the university and the townspeople at that time. And I grew up here. And to say I was a feminist so boldly, my teachers, my high school teachers and our grade school teachers, and neighbors and friends of my parents, everyone would know, because it was called the Village of Oxford at the time. That's how small it was. Things are completely different now. We're a city now, and of course the town gown is wonderful that we have now, but it wasn't that way then. The only good thing about that was I could go on campus and give radical talks, and none of my high school friends or teachers or salespeople didn't know a thing about it.
A bifurcated life.
Yeah. But
How did each of you get started in your activism work?
Well, I suppose the break counseling was the first. Is that what you mean?
Sure, or even you were talking about when you were younger.
Well, for me, I had a brother almost the same age. We're not even a year apart. He could go further on his bike than I could. He could stay out later at night and play than I could. He could do all kinds of things, but my mom would say, he's your little brother, now take care of him. Watch out for your little brother, And then I would say, well, why can't I, do these things that he's doing? I'm the big sister, he's the little brother. Well, things might happen to you, you're a girl. I said, well, what's that got to do with it that I'm a girl? At the time, I could beat him up. I could run faster than him, because I was, more mature. Something might happen to you. Well, what can it happen to him? Well, what she was referring to, of course, was rape, of my getting attacked, And my mom thought at the time that my brother couldn't. People didn't know that then, that little boys could also be raped. We're talking back in the 40s, never crossed their mind. So that's how I started understanding that it was not such a good thing that I was a girl, that my brother had more privileges than I did, and I didn't exactly know why. And then the way the boys would treat me and the other little girls at school, oh, you're just a girl, oh, you can't do that, or girls don't do that. So I learned early.
I'd say for me it was when I was in college, actually, and Vatican II, grew up a Catholic and went to a Catholic school. And Vatican II happened, and there were a number of things occurring simultaneously. And Vatican II really took me by surprise in that all of the changes happening in the Catholic Church were, I thought, pretty progressive, but yet nuns were still treated as adolescents of the church. They still couldn't go out unless they were in two. They couldn't drive a car back then. Well, the priests could drive cars, they could drink, they could smoke, they could go play golf, whatever. And it seemed not right that women continued to be treated as adolescents perpetually, never growing up. Simultaneously, what was happening was the Vietnam War. And I was participating in protests for that. And yet, it seemed that there were divided roles for men and women in that as well. That the women could make the signs or make the sandwiches, but not included very much in the strategizing. Simultaneously with that, also, what was happening was the civil rights movement. And again, that seemed to all be led by men, the civil rights movement. We didn't hear about many women involved. I mean, there were, and certainly later, I learned about Fannie Lou Hamer and lots of other women, but they weren't in the media so much, particularly. And all of those things really came together for me with an overlay of the beginning of the women's movement. And realizing that there were a lot of disparity between how women were seen and treated from men, even in groups that seemed to be working for civil rights. And I just found that problematic and offensive. At the time, I didn't have a lot of words to put to that, but it didn't feel right to me. And so I think I began doing things there.
And then what are you
I
both
remember
doing?
one thing from high school. My father had taught me, he was big in home movies, 8mm home movies. He taught me how to run the projector. I was very proud of that. Talawanda started up, new high school, and they had an audio-visual team. Oh, wow. I went down, I wanted to sign up for the audio-visual team. I thought it was cool. They'd come in your class, you know, and turn out the light, you know, and they wouldn't let me do it because I was a girl. That was the only reason. They didn't care that I could do it. Girls were not allowed on the audio-visual team. So, and you see how these things affect a person for their whole lives. I get emotional sometimes when I talk about this because it affects people. This is just not a story in the magazine. We're talking about people, how we can keep them down and keep them from becoming what, you know, the possibilities that they could have become. Still happening when you have costume shops where you take your little girl in and she can dress up as a princess.
In addition to creating the kids' costumes, what are you both doing now in terms of activist work?
Well, we're doing this. And we've been working on this project for about 4 years. And we're not finished yet. Are we, Kathy? No, we want to interview many people. And this may sound simple, but I wear feminist jewelry, I wear feminist t-shirts. I quietly do. I don't start arguments or anything. I don't walk up to people and say, I'm a feminist, are you? You know, it's just people just seeing it, oh, there's someone. It makes a difference, I believe. I think that's all that oh, well, one more thing. In the year 2020, you started to remind me, didn't you, Kathy? In the year 2020, it's the 100th anniversary of women's winning the right to vote. It wasn't given to women. So we're going to, Kathy and I and the League of Women Voters, I've gone to the board about 2 years ago and talked to them about this. We're going to recreate the march, suffragist march, dressed in the clothing of the period with the sashes, votes for women. We're going to start at one end at the Arts Center, where there will be in place at that time a statue of Oxford's own first woman, Caroline Scott Harrison. And we're going to walk down High Street to the park. And there we're going to have just wonderful things happen. And I want everyone in Oxford, every group, I want the churches, I want the schools, every organization to participate in this. I want Oxford to celebrate the 100th anniversary. And I know that we cannot bring in like Gloria Steinem. I mean, wouldn't that be fun? But we have local people and people at the university, and we could well, the sky is the limit what we can do. We have a local singer who maybe write a song just for this, and we have women playwrights at the Oxact, our local community theater, could write a play about the story of some of the famous women in Oxford, like a conversation between Helen Peabody, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who's the third person?
Mary
Oh,
Lyons. Mary Lyons?
And Caroline Scott Harrison. I think this is just an idea, but wouldn't that be interesting? They're all associated with Oxford, really associated with Oxford. They could have a conversation about what the fruits of their labor that we are celebrating, or not. There's people on campus who come up with all kind of ideas and role play in the parks. And the young children will learn about their heritage. I mean, I'm thinking about like a drawing of Alice Paul, coloring books give to the schools. Maybe we could have a contest of the best drawing or something. But I'm starting to work on that, and I want us to get together with Tony in May. Hopefully, we have to start this thing soon, and that will probably be my last hurrah.
So once again, Joanne believes we can do anything, and we will have, a major event in 2020 for women gaining the vote. I'm involved with Legal Women Voters now, and we're starting to work on gerrymandering to change the way the votes go, because I think we really can't do anything until we get through the gerrymandering process and realign how we get representation. I'm also working with the schools on climate issues around issues of social justice. And there are some big things that we're working on that I won't talk about particularly because we're in process with them. But there's a lot of work to be done yet in our schools, and we seem to slide back a lot. I'll give you just one quick example. My daughter was graduating in the year 2000 from the local high school, and at that time, the girls wore white graduation robes, and the boys wore blue. Can I talk to you about this? And there was a young woman that I knew who had not yet realized herself, I don't think, that she was lesbian, but I thought it was pretty clear she didn't get it yet. She is an out lesbian now and fine and proud of herself. But she wanted to wear a blue robe, not a white. She had taken a women's studies class while at the high school. She took one at Miami and realized all the symbolism of the white and the purity and virginity, etc. And she said, I don't need that, I don't want that. I'm not going to wear white. And the superintendent at the time said, well, you have to, because you're a girl. So I met with the superintendent at the time numerous times. And she said, well, challenging her on this. And she said, well, it's tradition. I said, a lot of things are tradition. Slavery was a tradition at one time. That doesn't make it acceptable because it's a tradition. So I worked really hard with her, and I said, I don't understand why when a student has to order their graduation robe, they have to look at the genitals to decide what color. How is that relevant? So, well, that's, again, the way we did it. It went on and on and on, but the long and the short of it was, the superintendent said that any boy who wore white or girl who wore blue would be removed from the graduation ceremony, that was a privilege to participate in, and they would be removed. So I just wanted to be really clear, and I said, well, who will remove them? And she said, well, the police. I said, okay. So I went to both the city police chief and the Miami University police chief, because it took place in Willett Hall, and asked each of them if they would remove a student because of the color of robe they're wearing, and explain the situation. And they both laughed, and they said, police chief, the police chief in Oxford said, no, we would not physically remove anyone for the color of clothes they have on. We're not doing that. That's not going to happen. So I went back to the superintendent and told her, police are not going to remove anyone. She said, well, then I'll have my staff do it. I said, okay, I just want to be really clear about this then. So if you have a female student who's in the graduation line and she's wearing a blue robe, and you can have some of your teachers come and physically remove her, touch her, and remove her, the superintendent said, well, maybe not like that. I said, well, how are you going to remove them then? You're not going to touch them, physically carry them out. I said, well, I'm not sure, but it went on and on. We ended up having to get appeal to a judge to get a restraining order so that she couldn't do that. Didn't have to use it because, and meanwhile, I was scouring legal books to find if there was any court ruling anywhere about clothing that you can wear. And I found all kinds of things. This is back in 2000. Rulings about whether boys could wear skirts to school or dresses ever. And this is long before transgender stuff was being talked about in schools. And what the rulings were, whether you could wear things that had advertising on them, all kinds of things. But I finally found a law that applied. So I made copies of it with a letter and hand-delivered them to each of the school board members' homes. And then we had a young man who asked for it in writing, because we had to have it in writing to get the judge, that the superintendent wouldn't allow it. So this young man wrote a letter to the superintendent saying what he was going to wear white. She said he couldn't. Anyway, so it was a big deal. And actually, I had a group of feminist friends from Cincinnati who came up graduation day, and we had lots of teachers and young people who got together in our backyard and made little blue and white ribbons, and I typed up a little index card that said something like, do you think it would be okay to have Jews wear blue and Christians wear white, or African Americans wear white and Caucasians wear blue? If you think that that's not appropriate, then why do you think it's appropriate to do it by sex? And these friends handed it out going into the graduation to people. And we also, the valedictorians, we had some who were going to wear the right color, but Velcro and take it off when they were on the stage. We had all kinds of plans. But anyway, didn't have to do it the morning of the graduation. But this was a big deal, and I thought terribly inappropriate. My son graduated in 2002, and there was a very out young man in his class who wanted to wear a white robe. And it was no big deal. It was just exactly as it should have been. Nobody cared, no big deal. He could order white, not a problem. So I thought maybe that's the way it is. And so I recently asked, because I'm on the local school district, I'm on the climate committee and on the diversity committee. And so I recently asked, can students choose either a white or a blue robe? And the superintendent said, yes, they can. I said, do the students know that? Because I had heard from students that girls had to get white. It's back to the old way. And so I said to the superintendent, but do the students know that? And she said, well, probably not. So we're back at this deal of blue for girls and blue for boys and white for girls. And the students don't know if they have a choice. They could choose either. So I'm working on things like that again. that there are some social justice and equity issues that need to be addressed. Yet again, they come round. And those are only some of the issues around social justice that I think still have to be addressed both in our schools and in our community. So I'm working on those.
Perfect. And then finally, what advice do you have for young activists who want to get involved and just don't know where to start with anything?
They know they're activists. They know that they want to do something.
Yes.
How to get started? Well, call your local NOW chapter would be a good place to start.
Or the League of Women Voters,
Yes,
because there are more of those around. I think look at your own life in places you see an injustice and make some decision about how you're going to affect change in that. And understand that it doesn't have to be a lot of people. It can be you and one or two other people, and you're going to take action. I'd also say write letters, write letters, write letters, write letters, write letters. Send emails to your elected officials, to your local community groups if you see an injustice. If there's something, maybe in your local food bank or in your local county commissioners or in your town council, city council, maybe there's an enormous gender imbalance. Maybe your little town has never had a woman mayor. Well, that needs to change, so run for office.
That's a good one.
Run for office. Contact Emily's list and find out how to do it, and do it. Now, the first step to that, though, is educating oneself. You cannot expect other people to always take the responsibility of educating you. You have to educate yourself about the issues, and then decide what's important to you, and take what may seem like beginning small steps, but start somewhere and take action.
If you are interested in viewing the NOW archives, please visit Miami University's library site. And if you are interested in the work being done in Miami University's WGS capstone, please visit their website at wgscapstonenow.live.miamioh.edu. Thank you for watching, and join us next time.
I am woman, hear me roar, in numbers too big to ignore, and I know too much to go back and pretend.